Jeremy is originally from Ohio, and he went to Ohio State University where he got his meteorology degree, and then came and did his graduate work here at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. He's a friend and a colleague. He has led a private storm chase group on tours across the country, taking photography as well. His photography is recognized by many people as one of the best storm photographers in the area. Jeremy will walk you through his photographic career, give you hints and ideas along the way so that you can do your own good photography. He will then meet with you. We have a half-hour break after his presentation. He'll meet with you in the lobby at his table where he has handouts that you can take away, and he'll direct you to the website where you can see his photos. And should you have any photography questions, he's your go-to person and you can ask him at that time. Well, thank you for being patient. As you can see, I'm running around. We've got not only the Symposium going on in here, the Weatherfest on the 3 floors of this building, and we have Doppler on wheels outside. Do visit Hy-Vee. They're selling, they have a cookout going on right now. You can buy lunch from them as well after Jeremy's talk. Thank you, Jeremy. I'm sorry your time is up. Are there any questions? Okay. Well, we're going to give you some more time, Jeremy. There you go. And thank you for your patience. Thanks. Check your mic. Make sure you're on.
Can you hear me? Obviously you can now.
Also want to remind you that all of these talks will be on the internet in a couple of weeks. Greg, who is here in the middle, is taping all of these, so you'll be able to come back and look at them again on the internet, should you so choose later on. We also have surveys at the end of each of the aisles here. If you would fill out one of those and leave them in the basket when you leave. We literally don't know what you want. We keep trying to guess. So for sure, give us some feedback. If you see one of our roving reporters asking for feedback or one of these forms here, let us know what you want us to do next time. And there will be a next time.
Test, 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me?
Make sure you look at those.
Good? All right. All right. Technical difficulties, so thanks for being patient. All right, so Dr. Dewey, thank you very much for having me be one of the main speakers this year. So used to being in the small classrooms, and he back in January he was like, we're going to try something a little bit different this year. We're going to have you speak in the main auditorium. All right, so from storms to sunsets, the science and art of my photography. All right, so Dr. Dewey went over a little bit about some of my past worked with a storm chasing tour group for a couple of years, back from 2001 through 2006. Also chased with him numerous times through the UNL Intercept Vortex Intercept team. And I think I have a few of my former colleagues in the audience. I was a employee at Best Buy as a digital imaging specialist for a couple of years. They may share some stories later on about how it is to survive working with Jeremy Bauer. All right, so yeah, just briefly, some background information. My best day was June 24th of 2003. Saw multiple tornadoes up in southeast South Dakota. Again, chased with Storm Chasing Adventure Tours for a number of years back in the early 2000s. And then the latter half, last few years, kind of getting the big picture as far as photography goes, and you're going to see that here. Let's go along. So, imagine before today, most of you have no idea who in the world I am. Well, you're going to find out over the course of the next 45 minutes. JRBStorm photography, it is more than just storms, as you're going to see. This is the main purpose of today is storm photography, but as you see out of my displays, I'm doing a little bit of everything. Weddings, portraits. We're going to have, like I said, a little discussion out there about photography. You want to talk to me about some things. Towards the end of the presentation, I'll have a couple links that you can go to some of my websites on Facebook and Flickr. If you want to ask me any questions, please feel free to do so. The question always is, how close have you ever been to a tornado? There you go. You can't laugh, it's okay. And how far have we come in technology? Well, when I was chasing with the tour group, this is how we got our data. We had to use a satellite dish, and we had to basically via satellite try to get weather data that way through the internet. We've come a long way since then, that's for sure. That was May of 2004. And here I am, early on. This is the beginning of the chase career. This was my first actual storm chase back in May of 2001. Now here we go with the fun stuff. Where did all this begin? The first camera was a little Sony point-and-shoot digital camera, 6 digital zoom. The video on it was very coarse. It didn't even, of course, back then you're not going to have HD. $400. So, what about, there it is. All its glory. You could take a picture and probably about 5 or 10 seconds later you'll actually have what you're taking a picture of. Yeah, it's pretty small LCD screen, pretty small camera, very basic, but hey. We've come a long way. May of 04, let's look at this ad from Sears. A 256 megabyte SD card was $100. So, a 4 gigabyte card in 2004 was $900. I went with the 16 megabyte, which back then was $120. So if you do the math, 1,024 megabyte equals 1 gig. You could have 16 gigs for $122,000. You have the option of buying a house or a memory card. I'll probably take the house. So this is what 1.3 megapixels in 2002 could get you. It's decent, pretty, sunset going on, and you get something like that, pretty coarse resolution, and then you can maybe at least do something like that. 2002 technology, patience is a virtue. If you had no patience, forget it. This was actually set up on a fence post, and basically all I had to do was just set the timer, and if it just so happens to get some, then you get some, and this is exactly what I got. I got one of these bolts from the blue that just came down. I guess it's a little hard for you to see, but there's actually a lady standing down there on the lower right-hand side. She actually kind of ran away after this hit, for obvious reasons. And then this is the tornado outbreak I spoke about in June of 2003. This is one of them that I saw. Again, pretty coarse resolution, yes, but remember, it's a camera from 2002. We're going to get into a little bit about severe weather photography here and later on in the presentation. And then this was up near Shatter, Nebraska, shelf cloud, back in June of 05. All right, so we come to the first DSLR that I bought. And this was back in December of 07. Now, one thing, and this is kind of my Best Buy and selling experience coming back to me, I have yet to meet an individual that's ever come up to me and say, I want to get into SLR photography. Yes, I want to buy a big clunky camera and carry it around and all that kind of good stuff. Most of the time, you want better pictures. You don't want a huge camera, you just want to get better pictures. And that's what you end up doing when you get into something like this. Now, over the course of the last few years, I've progressed. You go, and that's exactly what happens. You kind of, as time goes along, you get through to different cameras. Some of these I still have. Some of them I've sold to other individuals that wanted to get into advanced photography. Someone often asks me, what's the camera that I use the most? It's actually this Canon S95. It has over 7,000 images on it for a point-and-shoot camera. That is absolutely incredible, but there's a reason why for that. Later on in the show, what I'll do is, at the very end, there's going to be some recommendations. It's like, hey, Jeremy, what would you recommend? Well, that's going to be one of the cameras I'll recommend to you. So that's where that's at. So we get SLR photography. Well, yeah, it gets a little bit better. You get some better resolution, of course. You've got better things going on, and this is a thunderstorm that was down in northwest Missouri back in May of 2008. This was developing right there at sunset. And there you go right here as well. One of the things about photography is it's all about timing. Timing of day, when you're taking the picture, the settings, the actual landscape itself. Okay? If you remember the Kearney tornado from May 29th of 2008, this is the storm that produced it. This was the early stages. This was rapidly rotating when we were viewing it. We were actually quite surprised it actually did not produce the tornado at that point. This is probably about 10 miles west of Kearney at that point. And then the other thing you get into is you can do some trick shots. And I'm going to explain that here later on as far as what you can use with shutter release cables and whatnot. Okay, now if you are taking notes, this is probably the time you want to start writing. What's going to be here is you're going to have a series of 6 tips. These are tips that any one of you can actually use. It's very helpful. I'm hearing rustling. All right, very good. You are listening to me. All right. First one is, what are the basics? You've got to know the basics if you're going to do anything else. Okay. So, shutter speed. Pretty much it's going to be the amount of time that the shutter is going to be able to take, it's going to be open when taking that picture. It's very important. Usually with storm photography, it's not going to be nearly as important. Mostly it's going to be your low light. And your low light is going to come down to 2 things. It's going to be your aperture and your ISO. Your aperture, we'll talk a little bit here later on about that. It's the opening of the back of the lens, how much light it's going to let through. It's also going to affect your depth of field. ISO, best way to explain this, if you were big into film photography back when film was in its heyday, you bought 200 speed film, 400 speed film, and so on and so on. And basically, this is what ISO is. You have ISO 200, ISO 400, ISO 800, and so on. Basically, that's going to be allowed, again, in lower light situations, that's how you're going to be able to get those shots. One of the things to keep in mind is when you cut your shutter speed in half, you are actually doubling your exposure. Likewise, the same way when you double your aperture, you are actually also increasing your exposure as well. One of the key things here at the very bottom is the 1/250 is your shutter speed, f8 is the aperture. If you look across the bottom, those are all going to give you the same exact exposure. The photos are all going to look the same. But one of the reasons why you're going to use these in different cases is depending on what you want to do. Do you want to get a fast action shot, or are you looking to do something with a little bit more depth of field? What are you looking to do? So here's a tip. So what we have here is to show you exactly what the difference between a point-and-shoot camera can do and what an SLR can do. Picture on the left was taken with a point-and-shoot camera, very grainy, kind of hard to see. It's an okay shot. The one on the right, it's going to look a little bit better. Both images taken with the exact same settings, 1/60th of a second, f4, ISO 400. Megapixels now are we are literally in megapixel overkill. We are. One of the newest Nikon cameras out there, the Nikon D3200 is 24 megapixels. These 2 cameras, one's an SLR, the Canon 40D, the other one is a Canon S95, that's a point-and-shoot camera, both 10 megapixels. Can you tell which camera took which picture? The point-and-shoot camera took the top photo, the 40D took the bottom photo. The reason why we're going to cover that is it's going to tell you the bigger the sensor in your camera, better off your picture is going to look. It's not the number of megapixels. When you have a larger sensor, the pixels are bigger. So if you think about it, because the pixels are bigger, it is capturing the light better, it's capturing detail better. So that is exactly why as you go into these higher end cameras, these bigger sensors, that's why your photography is going to get a little bit better at what you can do. So this was This was a night shot I took a couple weeks ago. This was just in the sky. Again, the low light capabilities of what you can do with digital SLR photography now is just ridiculous. Again, top photo was taken with a full frame camera. The full frame is basically the same size sensor that you would have seen in film cameras. Nowadays, when you get into these, what they call APS-C or crop sensor cameras, the sensor is smaller. So what you see here is the top photo was taken with Canon 5D Mark II full frame. Bottom photo was taken with a Rebel XTI. You can see there that the top photo looks a lot cleaner. You have a lot more detail because of the size of the pixels. So now we're going to actually get into probably what you came here for today, and that is the actual tips. What are we looking to do? So sunrises and sunsets. Biggest things that you'll probably need is you're going to want to have a tripod. You're going to want to have some type of shutter release cable. The reason being is if you are actually physically touching the shutter on the camera, you are moving the camera. So you will have some type of shake in there. So that could cause some blur. So it is better to use some type of external cable to actually open and close your shutter. Now, one of the things, the tips someone asked me is, what do you use for it? And I say use aperture priority mode. So, what is aperture priority mode and how do I get it on my camera? On most cameras, Canons, you're going to see it as AB. On other cameras, it'll be A. That is for aperture priority. What it's doing is you set the aperture, or what's the f-stop, and the camera will choose the corresponding shutter speed accordingly to get the best exposure. So I said we're going to revisit aperture. Here it is. So you have, starting down here at the end, you notice the smaller the number, actually the bigger the opening. It is actually inverted. So when the number is smaller, the opening in the back of the lens is bigger. So one thing you can tell here is between f2.8 and f4, it says, well, there's not a huge difference there. f2.8 is twice as bright as f4. Likewise, when you go compare f4 and f5.6, f4 is twice as bright as 5.6 is. So again, and this is why this diagram is nice. Larger the opening, smaller the opening. Larger the opening, more light. Smaller the opening, you have less light to work with. Timing is everything. I said this before, that if you're patient enough, you could, and conceivably within a minute or two, your scene can look completely different. Within a minute or two here, at least in my opinion, the bottom photo, you'll see you have a lot more color going on than the top one. That is why timing again is everything. Again, these are only taken probably just a couple minutes apart. One of the things that I have always stressed, and I know not everyone will do it, and that is, when it's possible, shoot in RAW. Now, shoot in RAW is basically a file format. The RAW file is something that means there's no compression. So, as an example, proof is in the pudding. This picture was taken at Holmes Lake in Lincoln. This is set up on a tripod. This was shot as a JPEG, so this is right out of the camera. So the camera has processed the photo the way it thinks it should be. The second photo I'm going to show you here is, it was taken in RAW, and then I processed it to look what it looked like to me. Big difference. When you shoot in JPEG, the camera is doing a lot of compression on that file. So it can look completely different. The bottom photo is exactly how I saw it with my own eyes. But on the top photo, the JPEG, that's what the camera thinks it was seeing. So when it's applicable, shoot in RAW and convert that thing to JPEG later on. Pretty much any camera, DSLR and most Most of your what is called bridge cameras, advanced point and shoots are going to have a raw format on there. Now I understand, that at this day and age, timing, you may not have enough time to process what you want to do. You want to get those photos, you want to share them on Facebook, you want to share them on Twitter, what have you. A lot of cameras will give you the option to do RAW and JPEG at the same time. So you have your RAW file you can work with later, and then you have your JPEG that you can actually go ahead and actually use straight out of the camera if you'd like, immediately. When you shoot in RAW, yes, it is going to take up a lot of more room than when you shoot JPEG, but as you can see, the results are going to be a lot better for you. Most cameras nowadays are fairly easy that you can get something to convert that RAW file. Canon, I know I'm a Canon guy, I didn't realize that, but one of the biggest things is any Canon camera that has the ability to shoot RAW, it comes with the RAW conversion software right in the box. Basically, there's two things on there. It's called Digital Photo Professional, and then there's also Image Browser. Both of those can actually convert your RAW files into JPEGs immediately. There are numerous programs out there that you can convert your RAW files into JPEGs. I mean, there's probably way too many to list. Probably the most common ones are probably going to be Photoshop and Lightroom. Now, why shoot RAW? Again, we're just going to very briefly go over this. The detail that you can get, the levels of brightness, and what exactly that RAW file can do. Basically, the RAW file, again, we'll revisit film again. In the days of film, you took that slide, you took it to the darkroom, and you processed it any way that you wanted to. Now with digital, your RAW file, you take that, your computer is now the darkroom. And that is what you're going to be using to process that photo. So it's the same concept, it's just different methods to be doing that. So if you can shoot, and you have the opportunity to shoot in the RAW format, do it because you're going to get a lot better results. And that's what this is going to emphasize again. Now, everyone says, well, yeah, you have to edit it. Well, yes, you are going to edit your photos. Editing and photoshopping are two totally different things. Everybody should edit their photos in some way, shape, or form. It's just the name of the game. Photoshopping is, of course, taking it another step, removing things from the photo, removing maybe trees, power lines, what have you. One of the things, again, we go back through and you do, using the RAW format, look how much depth you have going on here. Look at the colors. You have dark, you have bright, then you have dark, and then you have bright. It seems that when you get into something like this, you just get a lot better results. This was actually taken in San Diego. This was in out there by out in the harbor. And then this was at up in the mountains. This was at the San Hito Mountains up there. So as you can see here, you're getting towards sunset. You have some air particles causing, some reflection going on there. You just have a pretty scene, and you've got the nice foreground going on with the trees silhouetted there. And then this was up in South Dakota last June. This was a storm at sunset up there. Again, just the amount of colors and everything that you can get going on when you shoot the RAW format. So, probably one of your topics that most people are going to be most interested in is photographing lightning and how to do it safely. So lightning photography, again, tripod, something steady that you can have that on a surface where that camera is not going to move. Again, you're going to need to have some type of external shutter release, either a wireless cable or something to get that shutter open and closed. You're probably going to do manual focus. If you do auto, you're going to be in trouble because you can't guarantee what that camera is going to focus on. Usually you're going to want to probably use what's called bulb mode. We'll go over here that in a second. Patience, big time. You've got to be patient. I'm going to show you here an example of what can happen. Most people will use a lightning trigger. I realize that those are out there. I have never used one before. They are effective. They do work well. I do recommend them because they do a fantastic job. Again, so switch that to manual focus. Focus your lens to as close to infinity as possible. The bulb mode is clearly on there. Now, it's going to be found if you go into the manual settings, the dreaded manual settings on your camera. You can either turn your dial all the way past 30 seconds and you'll get the bulb, or some cameras actually have a dedicated bulb mode on there. The bulb mode basically means this. When you open the shutter, it's just going to continue until either your battery runs out or you decide to close it. One of the two. So you can get some fantastic images doing that. Okay. We all make mistakes. I made one here. Yeah, this is a bit overexposed. This was only a 10-second exposure, so it's not on very long. So obviously, again, be patient. You've got to change your settings accordingly. A couple minutes later, it's like, okay, well, let's increase, let's slow down that aperture a little bit, go to f9, take down the ISO down to 200, and then there you go. This is what I got. So what ended up happening? First photo was overexposed. Why? Well, we had multiple strikes. It overexposed the photo. So what you have to do is, you have to compensate for it. And there's going to be a diagram here in a second that'll show you what's going on. You have to stop it down to slower, F9, F13, whatever you got to do. Most of the time, lightning, you're going to do it at F5.6 to F8, most of the time. I'd say probably about 80-85% of the time that's where you're going to be. The second photo, it was right on the money. Now I'm going to show you, kind of build the anticipation to my best lightning photo yet. So this was June 27, 2011, 1:30 in the morning. One of the things I always emphasize to everyone, have your camera always ready. Have your batteries charged, have that thing ready to go, because you do not know what could possibly come up. This was no severe thunderstorm watch, no severe thunderstorm warning. This was just a storm that developed on the west side of Lincoln at 1:30 in the morning. Got the tripod, set up the camera. What the heck? Open the shutter, step back inside. 5 seconds later, bright flash, kaboom. Step back outside, 24 seconds, total exposure, and that's what you got. I hear a lot of wows. You're darn right, wow. 24-second exposure, f8, ISO 200, right on the money. This was not anywhere near what I anticipated what this was going to look like. This is why I always emphasize, have that camera ready to go. You do not know what potential opportunity could come forth. We can talk about that later out front. All right, so shutter release cable. Yes, longer shutters possible. Again, that way you are not physically touching the camera. If I had mainly closed the shutter on that shot, it's ruined. Because that camera has been, I touched the camera, that means even the slightest jitter, and you have some blur, and it's not going to look like that. So that's why I emphasize, you've got to have something to either a wireless or a wired cable to open and close that shutter. Most of your wired shutter release cables are going to be less expensive, usually $20 to $40. If you go with a wireless option, they're going to be more expensive. They're probably going to be anywhere between usually about $100 and $150 for that. Now, I'm going to stop here very briefly, let you look at this slide, because there's a lot of things going on here. You can have lightning strikes that are close, yet they're pretty dull. You can have lightning strikes that are pretty far away, and they're very bright. So this is kind of, now I'm not saying that this is going to be 100% this is what you use. What I'm saying is, this is a guide. This is what I think, this is me, this is what I would be doing if I was photographing lightning under these situations. Usually, now one thing I notice here is my ISO is never above 200. That means you're going to have the least amount of noise possible, and that's what you want. You do not want as much noise in those photos, so keep it at ISO 100 or 200 all times. How do I do it safely? That's another story. One of the things that everyone, I'm pretty sure everyone's pretty, decently weather savvy here. You have tornado warnings, you have severe thunderstorm warnings, you have blizzard warnings, you have flash flood warnings. There is no lightning warning. Your garden variety little storm can have lightning and it can come out of the blue. So one thing you always have to do, and I will say this till I can no longer do this anymore, and that is do it safely. Always have safety in the back of your mind. Using either a longer telephoto lens, using something that can either be in your vehicle. With this right here, now this is where this leads into this company called Joby. They make these tripods, also called gorilla pods. Now this is here shown on the side of a rock. What I've seen individuals do is they put these either in their vehicle. If your back of your vehicle has maybe a hatch, you can put it back there. Or put it on your side mirror. You can do something like that. So you can maybe do it safely. Now, photographing severe weather. Getting into this. First and foremost, I will say this again, safety. No storm is worth dying for. So always, have safety in the back of your mind. Focus on the danger. Keep that always going in the back of your mind. Biggest thing to do, again, keep your gear dry. Take something with you. What I've done is I've taken plastic bags. Those little sandwich bags. Cover your camera. Keep it so it doesn't get wet. Always remain calm. Have an escape plan. Know what you're doing. Watch the storm. Watch the radar. Know where you're always at. One of the biggest things, pieces of equipment that you could probably buy for your camera is a neutral density filter or circular polarizer. I'll have those with me right now. You can take a look at them out at the display table. Those are great things. The neutral density filter, basically, it's in half. The bottom portion of it is normal, just like a normal filter. The top of it is slightly darker. That's great for storms, especially, getting into harsher part of the days as far as, lighting goes. That helps you out doing that. I don't see Dr. Dewey, so this is going to be something that he will vividly remember. This was a storm chase back in June of 2008. This is up near B. How many of you are storm spotters in here? Quite a few of you? Okay. Some of you might remember this storm. This is probably the greenest sky I have ever seen in my life. It was very, very dark. This would be incredibly difficult to photograph, and I had a heck of a time. I took probably about 30 or 40 pictures, and I would say this is probably about the best one I could get. This was a very prolific hail producer. One of the things, again, when you're out there is be always on the alert of what is going on around you. Some of you will probably remember this one as well. This was June 11th, 2008. This was the same day as the Boy Scout tornado that went through there. This was the exact same day. This is actually the exact same storm. This was the initial stages of it. One of the things you can see immediately on this one, the pointer here, you got a lot of rain, a lot of hail going on right here. One of the biggest things they said is they could not see that tornado coming. It's an HP supercell. You stick around for the storm spotter training, high precipitation. It's going to be very difficult to see any tornado, anything like that coming out of this thing because it's just wrapped in rain. So literally, I believe it was about 45 minutes later, that is when this storm continued moving eastward and produced that tornado that hit that Boy Scout camp. One of the other things, again, we're using these as examples, kind of tying in the storm spotter part. There's a tornado right here. You can't see the condensation funnel, but there's dirt on the ground here. And one of the things that helped me get this was using one of those neutral density filters. It darkened this part, and it made this part kept this part of it, as far as exposure, consistent, so you could actually see this. That is a tornado. There is dust on the ground. This is the This is the funnel right here. There's no condensation, so you can't see it. And a lot of tornadoes this day were like that. You could not see the condensation funnel all the way down the ground on this particular day. This one is near Oregon, Missouri. Again, this is where we're emphasizing the use of filters, both your polarizers and your neutral density. Again, to make the colors, more even, to also make your exposure look a lot better. One of the other things too, I always emphasize, it's a great tool, especially when you're doing any type of severe weather photography. There's probably a wide angle lens. Something 10 millimeter, 12 millimeter, something of that nature, so that you can get a lot in the scene. Then here's another example. This was a small storm that went through Lincoln in May of 2011. Again, you notice the blues up here, there are a little bit deeper hues up in here, and then you get this clear rainbow down here. Again, using a neutral density filter, right about here, this image is split in half. It's making this part up here a little bit darker. It's keeping the exposure even down here. Again, so you got a lot of even more photo going on. That's exactly why this is a good example of why using something like a neutral density filter is nice for photography. This was Lincoln, August of 2011. Got some nice mamadas going on here. This was a storm that came through, shelf cloud. Again, the use of your neutral density filters and polarizers are very crucial here because, again, you get a lot of detail going on. You've got, again, a lot of these under any other circumstances may not be possible if that was not on the camera at that point. Again, that's something, if you're interested in talking more about with me out in the lobby, I'll gladly visit with anyone that has questions, especially with something in regards to this. Again, same thing here. This was in Grand Island last year. Again, same thing going on. Again, the use of the filter, you keep this part of it darkened down here so it prevents it from overexposing. Down here, it keeps the exposure the same. So again, you got a lot of detail going on here. There's no highlights washed out. It's a pretty clean looking photo. Same thing going on down here as well with that. So, kind of a brief summary right there as far as that goes. Severe weather photography, wide angle lens. Get the camera out of auto. Get it out of the A mode. Come on now. You got to get it out of that auto mode. You've got to. The auto mode, the camera thinks it's smart. It's not. It's only going to be as good as what you want to get out of it. A lot of cameras have this live view going on. And live view, and again, I'll show this out in the lobby, is the nice thing about it is it previews your exposure. If you set it up correctly, if you're not sure, it's just like, no, Jeremy, I don't know if the settings I have on this camera are going to make this picture come out. Well, what you can do is flip on the live view real quick. If it looks good, the picture's going to look good. If it looks underexposed or doesn't look good, then your settings are off. You need to change something in there in order to get that picture the way you want it to look. And again, filters, if you're going to use them, don't buy cheap ones. You're buying $400 or $500 lens. Don't buy a $20 filter because it's not going to look good. If you buy really, really low quality filters, they're not going to look real good. In my honest opinion, if you want to buy a decent filter, look into what's called Hoyas or Tiffins. They make very, very good filters. They're pretty good quality. Granted, they're probably going to be a little bit more expensive. When I say cheap filter, $20 or less. A Tiffin or a Hoya is probably going to run you about $40. So yeah, it's about twice the amount of money. But in the end, it's going to be a lot better for you. And always, always have the camera on you and ready to go, because you never know what you might get. So here's, again, another use of the filters going on here. Again, you can make sure your exposure is nice and even the way you want to. Can anyone identify that landmark? Yeah. There you go. It's in there somewhere. I think this day, I was in Scotland here at that point, but yeah, it's back in there somewhere. Actually, one thing to point out, what camera do you think took that photo? Point and shoot or DSLR? It was actually that point and shoot camera, that S95. Again, I'm going to show you here, I'm going to get to my last tip is for recommendations. I'm going to show you that camera. Thank goodness it's spring game. We do not have to worry about this anymore. Thank goodness. No more snow, at least for a while, we hope. All right, last tip, recommendations and predictions. Every talk that I give, I always close with this. Here we go. I mentioned it several times, point and shoot. The S95, it's long gone, you're not gonna find it. But the good news is, because companies will come out with a new version of it every 6 months to a year, this is the current version, the S110. How much difference is between the S110 and the S95? Not very much. It has maybe a few different options on there. Actually, one thing I can tell you right off the bat is it does have a longer zoom. It's 5x optical zoom. The S95 was only 3 and some change. So this is right here now. One of these links, everyone says where to go to get reviews on cameras, the good, the bad, and the ugly. www.dpreview.com. DP for Digital Photography Review. That is a great website. I have often, when anyone asks me, what websites do you use as far as maybe looking back on cameras and maybe making your next purchase, use that site. They do a very excellent job of doing thorough research on the cameras. All right, bridge camera. The reason why it's called a bridge, it bridges the difference between a point and shoot. It's not a point and shoot, it's not a DSLR. But a bridge camera can shoot raw. And this one is, Sony probably does the best overall when you get into this range. There's 2 things Sony does really well. One, they have the Carl Zeiss lens on there, that's very high quality. The second thing that they do is on here, you can barely see, it's right here, right there, it's a little squiggly box thing. It's sweep panorama mode. Everyone loves to do panoramas, so literally what you can do is, before, what you had to do is you had to take a picture, line it up, take another picture, line it up, take another picture, and then you had to merge them together using some type of software. The Sony one, you just click it and go through, and it stitches the whole thing together for you right there in the camera. So you don't have to do any fancy processing, you don't have to do anything like that. Bridge camera, this is the newest one, the HX300V, has a 50 optical zoom lens, so you can get pretty much everything you want wide angle to telephoto that you'd like on there. DSLRs, I'll tell you what, now anymore it's really hard to go wrong. I often will tell anyone the number one thing that you can do when you're going to look to purchase a camera, pick it up first. Go into a store, something, anything, look at the camera, because you got to know what you feel comfortable with. When individuals ask me when I was selling cameras, I told them you got to pick it up, because person A might find the Canon to their liking, person B might like the Nikon better. It's all about personal, it's all about you. So that's why you got to go in, you got to pick it up, you got to compare them. And you're probably wondering, well, Jeremy, there's a new version of this guy out. This is last year's model. I know, there's no difference between the T4i and the T5i. They're very similar. Don't be afraid to buy a camera that might be, quote unquote, older, because if you still buy these new in box, they're still great cameras. And the beauty part is, and I'm speaking from experience, guess what happens when the new version comes out? This version plummets in price. So you're still getting a great camera, but now you're getting it less expensive than you were. Perfect example, when this camera was out on the market, it was about $850. New version came out, you get it for about $550 now. So these prices just plummet. We're actually getting to the point now where, I almost hate to say it, we're getting to expensive disposable cameras, because these companies will roll out new cameras every 12 to 18 months. It's just the way of it now. Future. This is a compact camera it's a Sony RX1. It's a full frame compact camera. So picture in your mind a point and shoot. Everyone knows how small point and shoot is. They put a full frame into a point and shoot camera. meaning you can get even better images. Now, of course, it's brand new technology, so you can have all of this for $2,700. And I'm going to go buy one right now. But what this is signaling is we can put better technology, we're evolving even more. This was a huge step. This was probably 5 years ago. Every expert on the planet said, no way. Here we are 5 years later, they did it. And the one thing I'll give Sony credit for is they're very, very good at being innovative. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And again, full frame cameras becoming affordable. We have 2 cameras now that are roughly $2,000 or less. The first ever full frame digital SLR was actually in '91. Kodak, when Kodak was actually still relevant, made a digital back on a Nikon F3. That was a film camera. You could have all of that for $28,500. So we went from $28,500 down to about $2,000. And probably another couple of years here, you're probably going to be able to get cameras that are going to be full frame, going to be about $1,500 or less. It's just the way the technology is evolving. Just think about this, 1991 to 2013, in that amount of time, we went from $28,500 down to under $2,000, that fast. Now, I know the question's going to come up, so I'm going to answer it immediately. Jeremy, what about cell phones? I have no problem people using their cell phones, taking cameras, because guess what? When I'm traveling, I don't like taking my big cameras with me. I like traveling as light as possible. So if I can have a cell phone on me that can take great pictures, sure. There is a serious negotiation going on here with Nikon. They're going to put a Nikon sensor and a phone. This is groundbreaking, because now what that effectively does, if this does come to fruition, point and shoot cameras, bye, they're gone. Because now, think about it, if you can have a sensor put into a phone and you can get that kind of images, what's the point with that going on? All right, so conclusions. As far as your photography, you got to find out what you're all about. That's all about you. You got to develop your own style. That is your whatever you want. My style is I like taking great pictures, but I also like sharing information with people so that they can also get great pictures. That's me. Research thoroughly before you buy. Use that website, DP Review. Go into the store. Look at the cameras themselves. Do all that. Bodies are bought. Lenses are investments. Your average camera body will be replaced, as far as the company goes, they'll replace it every about 12 to 18 months, and some of the higher end models will be a couple of years. Well, lenses, they only replace those every about 10 to 15 years. I am an advocate of buying your lenses first, getting the good glass, and getting some type of body that you can manage with, and then just progress like I did. Just progress as you go. Every couple of years, if you can, save up, buy yourself a little bit more affordable camera. Again, I'll stress this again. Be attentive, be ready for anything, have that gear ready. Have your batteries charged, know where everything is at. My biggest problem is when I'm ready to go somewhere, I can't find my stuff. It's all over the place, so make sure it's somewhere where you know where it's at. Now, a quick plug, I got to. This is my Facebook page. This is probably the best way to communicate with me right now. I'll share a lot of my photos on here. I'll have the link there at the end. I'll have some flyers out front too as well. Again, the whole primary purpose of doing this in the first place was to share information with individuals like you. If you have questions, if you want to look at some great photos. But the other part of it, what I do, this was out at the Offutt Air Show this past year. One thing I do when I post a photo, because again, it's about for me, I like to interact with people. I like to teach people. Look what I do. I put the settings right there. So it's just like, Jeremy, what settings did you use? There you go. You got them right there. You know exactly what I was using at that point. That's why I always like sharing this information, because again, it's just like, again, how did you take that photo? There you go. All right, my Facebook site, facebook.com/JRBStorm photo. I got my Flickr account as well, where you can go look at some of my other photos. And again, as you can see, you know, as over time has gone, I do a lot more than just severe weather photography. Kind of like a jack of all trades. I've got into a lot of other aspects of photography. I just love photos. Everyone will ask, Jeremy, you know, what do you consider yourself? Are you an expert? Are you, you know, what are you? I'm the same thing that I was 13 years ago. I'm an enthusiast. I love photography. I love taking photos. I love sharing my work with other people. If you want to call me, you know, whatever you want to call me, but first and foremost, I'm an enthusiast. I love taking pictures. I love sharing my work with other individuals and teaching them what you can do. All right, well, that is everything. I will be out in the lobby as soon as we're done. If you want to visit and questions, comments, criticism, hopefully not too much of the third part. That way I will gladly visit with you. You can take some flyers, we can chit-chat. But in the meantime, we've got a couple minutes here, so thank you very much for attending. And as always, thank you for coming each year to this event.